Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for shedding light on the animal research industry. This presentation is brought to you jointly by the Northwest Animal Rights Network and Rise for Animals. Please note that during this presentation, we will be using the term animal to refer to non-human animals, in recognition of the fact that, of course, we humans are animals too. The use of animals for human research and experimentation has been a subject of debate for centuries, and in fact, many historians attribute the formation of our modern animal rights movement to early opposition to animal research. So truly, the anti-vivisection cause, or our opposition to the use of animals as experimental tools for humans, is foundational to the concept of animal rights, even though it often gets overshadowed by other issues. We have no way of knowing how many animals are exploited in the name of science, but relatively conservative estimates project a victim toll of over 100 million each year in the US alone. It is also important to know that the animal research industry relies on shielding its practices from public view. Researchers' willingness to perform acts of animal cruelty out in the open helped set fire to anti-vivisection sentiment, and researchers quickly responded by erecting walls and locking doors to hide behind. They continue to hide their work from us today because they know, like we do, that the more we see the barbarity being inflicted upon animals, the more likely we are to oppose animal research. And this means that one hugely important and potentially impactful role we can play as animal advocates is that of hybrid investigator and public educator. We can use tools available to us, essentially, to see over walls and behind doors, and to tell and show others the truth about what's being done. How we can catch these glimpses of what's happening in labs is the topic we're going to be discussing today. We're going to focus on several tools we can use to research, investigate, and spur greater public knowledge about the goings-on in animal research laboratories. Information can be procured from each of these sources that, when combined with information from the others, helps to paint a picture of vivisection both nationally and at more local, discrete levels, such as in particular states, at particular research facilities, or with regard to particular victims. To get started, let's consider the United States Department of Agriculture, or the USDA. The USDA is the federal agency charged with overseeing U.S. research facilities that are subject to the Animal Welfare Act, or the AWA. There's a huge amount that could be said about this law, but for our purposes, it's most important to understand four things. First, the AWA was passed by elected politicians in response to mounting public pressure about the use of some animals, specifically dogs, in laboratories, and it was both structured with heavy input from the animal research industry and intended to help quell public concern about animal research. It was not, and is not, intended to actually regulate research. Second, the AWA is the only federal law that applies to the use of animals in research, but it sets only the most minimal of welfare standards. And even these can easily be circumvented by researchers for quote-unquote scientific reasons. In a nutshell, then, the AWA does not prohibit researchers from inflicting a single type of harm upon a single type of animal, or a single animal, him or herself. Third, the AWA applies only to an estimated 1% of all animals used for research. The AWA limits its coverage to warm-blooded vertebrate animals, which serves to exclude fish, cephalopods, reptiles, insects, and many others, and also specifically excludes rats, mice, and birds bred for research. Indeed, these latter three, rats, mice, and birds, comprise an estimated 99% of all research victims. Further, the AWA excludes from its purview an unknown number of research facilities that use only unregulated species of animals. So if a lab only uses rats and mice, for example, we may not even know it exists. Fourth, the AWA has never been meaningfully enforced by the USDA through its Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, or APHIS division. In fact, the USDA is often described as a partner of the research industry and has, by way of general example only, failed to perform statutorily required inspections of research facilities and used its discretion to gut or avoid leveling any supposed penalties for violations. This aside, the AWA charges APHIS with inspecting all registered research facilities on an annual basis and charges all registered research facilities with submitting to APHIS an annual report summarizing their animal research operations. Records associated with these activities are those we're most likely and most easily able to obtain. Let's see how. The USDA makes some records publicly available via its website, pictured here. We'll begin by searching up copies of the annual reports submitted to the USDA by regulated research facilities. And to do so, we'll click on the link at the bottom of this page. Next, we'll decide on our search criteria. If we want to see all the annual reports available for a given year, all we have to do is select the year we want from the Year drop-down menu and hit Search. If we want to get more specific, searching by city, state, zip code, or for a particular facility, we'll want to use one of the other search fields available to us. For our example, we were looking for the University of Washington and searched for it by name. The information that popped up at the bottom of the screen included the UW's customer and certificate numbers, both of which can be used to search for this entity in the future using the associated search fields. To navigate to the UW's annual reports, we'll select the Annual Reports tab below the Search button and adjacent to the View Registrants tab. From here, we can select any annual report displayed by clicking on View Report. All annual reports provide similar information, including the types and numbers of regulated animals used for research purposes during the specified year. They are listed in the leftmost column, or column A. Columns C, D, and E relate to the types of experiments undertaken by the reporting facility and specifically reference the infliction of pain and whether or not that pain was mitigated through the use of, for example, painkillers. Column B provides the number of animals who were used for breeding purposes, typically to breed additional victims to be used by researchers. You'll want to note that column F, which provides the total number of animals, does not include the animals listed in column B. Certain organizations that report on this data, like Rise for Animals, do include the animals listed in column B in the total number. So if you encounter a discrepancy between an institution's reported figures and figures being reported by other entities, you'll likely want to check for this. Returning to the main page, we can also access USDA inspection reports. As we mentioned earlier, the USDA is, pursuant to the AWA, supposed to perform unannounced inspections of all registered research facilities each year, but they have not been fulfilling this obligation. And Rise for Animals is actually suing the USDA over their failure to do this. The case is currently pending in federal court. But for those inspections the USDA does undertake, we will want to access those reports through the highlighted link. Once again, we'll start by searching. This time, we search for the UW by using its certificate number, which we discovered during our initial search. Once we have clicked the search button after entering the certificate number, we will be able to access the inspection reports in which we're interested by clicking on the links in the left-hand column. We'll tend to come across two different types of inspection reports. One, those that don't document any AWA violations, like this one. Or two, those that do document AWA violations, like this one. The USDA doesn't typically record much information about the violations it notes, at least partly because it knows that anything it documents may be subject to public disclosure. But its records should and typically do provide enough information to paint at least a general picture of any noted facility happenings and violations of law. Returning once again to the main page, we can access the USDA's enforcement actions through the circled link. Enforcement actions provide records of instances in which the USDA issued official warnings or leveled other penalties against research facilities found to be in violation of the AWA. When looking for enforcement reports, it is our experience that the best way to search is by institution name, as we have done in the search box circled here. Our attempts to search by license category, which in theory should allow us to search only among research facilities by sifting out other entities regulated by the USDA, have often failed to bring up all relevant enforcement actions involving research facilities. So we've learned not to necessarily trust that search feature. Here again, we are interested in the UW, and our search has brought up a result. We can access the record by clicking on the link populated to the left. It's important to know that not even nearly all records pertaining to research facilities are posted by the USDA, so submitting requests for other records is often an important and helpful approach to learning more. Pursuant to the Federal Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, we have a right to request access to additional documents created by the USDA, but we have to follow a specific process. To begin, we'll want to access the website listed at the top of this slide. We'll want to register, which is a quick and easy process, followed by signing in. Once we have signed in with our new credentials, we will want to select Submit Request. Please know that if at any time you want or need help completing a request, we hope that you will not hesitate to reach out to NARN or Rise for Animals. Contact information will be provided at the end of this presentation. After you've submitted a request, you can log in and check the status of that request by selecting Check Request Status. This will bring up a list of all open requests that you have entered, as well as their statuses. You will also be able to access links to download requested documents once they become available, meaning once they've been posted by the government. Leaving the USDA, we'll next turn to the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, which is the largest funder of animal research both in the United States and worldwide. Like the USDA, the NIH is a federal agency, and its records are subject to the Freedom of Information Act. The NIH holds records for all research facilities to which it provides grant funding. When research facilities accept grant money from the NIH, they sign contracts stating that they will comply with the Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, which applies to more animals than the AWA, but does not have the force of law. Rather, the guide represents a contract between the research facility and the government. The guide does apply to rats, mice, and birds who are excluded by the AWA, but just like the AWA, the guide was not intended to restrict research and does not prohibit a single type of harm to a single type of animal, or a single animal, him or herself. The NIH's equivalent of the USDA's APHIS division is the Office of Laboratory Animal Welfare, or OLA, which monitors the contracts between the NIH and animal research facilities, including those facilities' compliance with the guide. To begin researching facilities that contract with the NIH, we can access this website. Unlike the USDA, the NIH does not routinely post research facility records for review on its website, but we can use its webpage to confirm whether a particular entity is an NIH grant recipient, and therefore whether we might want to submit a FOIA request for additional records. We'll start by scrolling down and selecting Domestic under Assured Institutions. Contracting facilities are called assured institutions because to secure NIH grant funding, they must execute an assurance that they will comply with NIH guidelines, including those contained in the guide. From here, we can sort facilities either alphabetically or geographically by state. We can also search for a particular facility by using the search bar in the middle of the page, which we've done here to find the University of Washington. To submit a FOIA request to OLA, we'll want to access the website listed at the top of this slide. Then, just as we did for the USDA, we'll want to first register, followed by signing in. Once signed in, we will submit our request by selecting Submit Request. This tool is almost identical to the tool we use to submit FOIA requests to the USDA. After we've submitted our request, we can log in and check the status of our requests by selecting Request Status. This will bring up a list of all of our requests, as well as their statuses, and links to download records once they become available, meaning once they have been posted by the government. Another tool that is available for NIH research is the NIH Reporter, which we're only going to touch on today because we're planning an entire webinar dedicated just to this data-rich but not particularly user-friendly tool. We can access the Reporter via the linked website, and one of the easiest ways to get started searching is by location of interest, using the active funding by state map to the left. For example, after clicking on Washington, we can navigate to the Org Names dropdown to find a list of Washington-based facilities. And from this list, we can pick the facility in which we're interested. Here, we have selected the University of Washington. We can then select the List option from above the facility list to bring up information about past or present grants that have been obtained from the NIH by the UW. To access more information about a particular grant, we can select View on the right-hand side. Please note that the results shown here will include both animal research-specific studies and studies that do not involve the use of animals. From here, we can drill down further on the grant information using the links on the left-hand side, such as Details, which will give us researcher information, answering questions like who is the lead investigator on this study. And if we scroll further down, funding information, including not only the total funding provided by the NIH for this study, but also as broken down into direct and indirect costs. In addition to pursuing records through federal agencies, we can also submit requests to individual public research facilities, meaning research facilities like state universities that receive public monies, through state-level public records requests. For example, we can submit requests for University of Washington specific records through requests for public records submitted directly to the University of Washington vis-a-vis Washington State's public records law. You'll want to note that each state has its own public records related law, such that requests for records really do differ by state, both in terms of the records that you can request or gain access to and the procedures you must follow to access those records. Again, please do not hesitate to contact NARN or Rise for Animals with any questions. One potential source of records of interest are research facilities' internal committees. All research facilities regulated pursuant to the AWA are required to establish an Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, or an IACUC, to help ensure that animal welfare requirements are being met at the institution. In so doing, IACUCs perform three primary functions. They undertake semi-annual inspections of their institution's research facilities to ensure compliance with applicable law. They file regulatory reports, typically those stemming from the inspections they've performed. And they review all institutional research protocols that involve animals. But unfortunately, IACUCs are not allowed to actually regulate research itself. The researchers get to decide if any given experiment should be undertaken, and the IACUCs can't really question this. Rather, given that these experiments are going to be undertaken, IACUCs are tasked with making sure that researchers are complying with the AWA's minimal animal welfare requirements. This tremendous handicapping of IACUC authority has led some commentators to allege that these committees are designed not primarily to benefit animals, but merely to give the impression that this is the case in order to shield researchers from further criticism. Additionally, research facilities pick the members of their own committees themselves, subject only to some baseline requirements, such as that each committee must include a veterinarian. Institutional CEOs or executives appoint IACUC members, And the result is that IACUCs are controlled by individuals who themselves engage in animal research or are sympathetic to animal research. Given this, it comes as much less of a surprise that nationally, IACUCs approve 98 to 99% of all animal research protocols put before them for consideration. IACUCs meet regularly, and depending on state law, their meetings may be open to the public. The University of Washington's IACUC meetings are open to the public, and members of NARN regularly attend both to offer public comment in opposition to animal research and to follow the research happenings at the institution. We can access information about the UW's IACUC, including its meeting schedule, by accessing the UW's website listed at the top of this slide. IACUCs also generate physical records that may be available for public review, but this depends on the specifics of state law, namely the particular state's particular public records law. In Washington, we can use the Washington Public Records Act to request IACUC records, as well as other UW records specific to animal research, by visiting the UW's webpage, which links to the UW's Public Records portal. Anyone can create an account by registering. Then, once you've logged in, you can specify what records you're seeking and submit a request for a particular content and date range very easily. Please note that when submitting these types of requests, it is very important to be specific in what you are seeking. Overbreadth in a request or failure to be specific enough to allow an entity to isolate the records you're looking for are common reasons that institutions deny records requests. If you have any concerns or questions, please do not hesitate to contact NARN or Rise for Animals for help or input. In addition to the tools we've already looked at, we can access a great deal of already obtained research facility records using Rise for Animals Animal Research Laboratory Overview, or ARLO database. ARLO contains information about labs that have registered with the USDA via APHIS or the NIH via OLA. ARLO is intended to be a tool for our movement's advocacy, and anyone is free to download, share, repost, and use any ARLO records as they wish. Most of ARLO's records were obtained through public records requests submitted by Rise for Animals, but anyone can submit legally obtained records to Rise for Animals for upload into ARLO. From ARLO's landing page, there are three primary search options. First, we can search for a specific facility. Second, we can search for a specific geographic area. And third, we can do a full text search. We'll look at each of these briefly and in turn. To guide us through the first option, searching for a specific facility, we've used the University of Washington, meaning that we've entered University of Washington in the first search box on ARLO's landing page. Clicking on University of Washington in the results display below brings up University of Washington's records. Available information includes an overview of animal use numbers as reported by the UW to the USDA and a sampling of available records. For additional information, we can use the links in the column under the University of Washington header to the left. Clicking on the Animals Used link brings up graphs that display total animal use figures, including by reported species. And selecting the Records link displays all available records connected to the institution. We can then view or download any of these records by using the appropriate links. To search by location, we use the second field on the landing page. Here, we've searched by the city of Seattle. We can then limit our results by lab type, such as public education or private, by species, and or by type of experiment based on the USDA reporting categories, as we saw categories C, D, and E on the annual report. We can also sort our results by location, recency of records, animal use numbers, or name. Finally, we can click on any of the green flags populating the map to the right to explore specific research facilities. The third search option utilizes full text searches and is available because uploaded records are rendered text searchable whenever possible prior to upload. This is a good place to search for a specific species, but please be warned that you will get a huge number of hits if searching for unfortunately common research subject species, like dogs. We can also use this bar to search for terms specific to experimental procedures or other research-related events. For example, here we've searched for NIH. We can narrow the results by record type, such as inspection report, by year, and/or by upload date. We can also sort the results alphabetically to have records for the same facility grouped together. From the Arlo homepage, we can also use the navigation options in the left-hand menu. The Search Records link is an easy way to see the newest uploads. Upload dates are listed in the furthest right column. Please note, however, that due to delays in receiving records, the newest uploaded records are not always the most recent records in the system. We thank you so much for joining us today as we investigated the animal research industry, and we hope that you found this webinar helpful. Please use the contact information included on this slide to make contact with NARN or Rise for Animals should we be of any assistance to you in your advocacy. Thank you so much for caring about the non-humans among us. And until our next webinar, take care.